How's it going, everybody? Chris Jackson here with another video. I want to talk about a very specific type of pedal. In my opinion, it's one of the four main fuzz families. So you got like the 2 transistor, which is like a fuzz face, then the 3 transistor, which is like a tone bender, then the 4 transistor, which is like a big muff, and then you have octave fuzz. Specifically, the one I want to talk about is the Super Fuzz. This is my favorite pedal of all time for a few reasons. When I play guitar, I'm not a lead guitarist really. I mainly play power chords, and I find that this pedal sounds cooler on power chords than any other pedal I've ever tried. So this is the Univox Super Fuzz. This is an original. It is technically my dad's. I think he got it for around, I want to say like $15 or something. Back in the day, he got it used actually, so it's pretty old. It's definitely in the 70s. Yeah, it's just really awesome. I am in love with this thing so much, in fact, that I have several clones of it. I have up to 12 Super Fuzzes, counting this one, and so I just want to go through them today and kind of just show my favorite settings on each of them. Let's start with just talking about kind of the deal with a Super Fuzz. So it's a gated octave fuzz with dual germanium diodes that produce square wave clipping. I had to read that. I'm not that smart. But yeah, that's what it is. It's just a gated octave fuzz. And it was invented in the late 60s in Japan by Fumio Maeda. He, I think, also worked with Korg, helped produce a lot of other things with them. It was originally found in a multi-effects unit called the Psychedelic Machine by the brand Honey, and then it was later released as individual pedals, this being one of them. The individual fuzz version of that Psychedelic Machine fuzz was called the Baby Crying Fuzz, or also the FY6. Eventually, Honey went bankrupt and they were taken on by Shin, which licensed and sold the Super Fuzz under many names such as Apollo, Jax, Crown, Companion. There's a ton. The one that I have is Univox. Every company that made an FY6, this is a list of all the ones I know about, and it's quite a few. But yeah, this is the Univox version. They were the US importer of Shin, and it started out as like a gray enclosure, and around 1970 got this red and blue one. There's other ones that are like black and gray, white and blue, stuff like that. This is definitely the most common one, is the red and blue. And it's very simple. It has 2 knobs and a switch. So it's got balance, which is just level, and then the expander, which is the amount of fuzz. And then you have the tone knob, which is switching between mid-present and mid-scooped modes. I generally have the fuzz up all the way and the balance just so it's the same as my clean volume. And I like both of these modes equally. I think there's some people who really only like one or the other, but I think they both have their value and they both just sound incredible to me. It also has an internal trim pot, which very mildly affects the amount of octave in the signal. Another cool thing about this is if you turn down your volume slightly and hit it with less input, you can get this almost like ring mod sort of thing, which is very cool. It's very large, as you can see. I used to have this on my board, which is why I have this thing. I didn't want to have to put a battery in, so this gives me the ability to connect it to a power supply. But yeah, now that I have so many Super Fuzz clones, this no longer is on my board. I just keep it for studio use. They're, not easy to find that are cheap, at least. You're lucky if you find one that's under $1,000, but I was fortunate enough to just inherit this, and it kind of started me on my pedal journey, and I will be buried with this most likely. So I'm just going to kind of play each of them through guitar and then also through bass. All of them are going to roughly have the same riff. It's just a, straightforward minor pentatonic thing, just to give you an idea. They all have different features, and I like all of them at different settings and for different tones. So some of them I'll be doing like just the tone 1 mode, some I'll be doing just the tone 2 mode. Maybe I like the in-between one a little better on some, to kind of show my personal favorite setting on each of them. So that's what I'm going to be doing. So these are not all supposed to sound identical the way I have them set up, because I don't really have an interest in showing that. I just kind of want to talk about the different options I have for me by owning these pedals. My signal chain and the gear I'm using is going to be in the description, so if you're curious about that, that's where it is. So let's talk about some of the clones I have now. Just gonna kind of speed through these because I don't want this to be a 10-hour video. This is the Guyatone TZ2, also called the Fuzz. It was made in Japan in the 90s. It has a volume and a depth knob, which are basically the same as the balance and expander knobs on the original. It does not have a tone switch. To me, this kind of sounds like it's in between the two modes on the original. That's my best way of thinking about it. It sounds very good. It's not gated, which is interesting. But now that I've collected quite a few different Super Fuzz clones, not all of them are gated. And I think that's because I'm guessing the Hyper Fuzz I don't think was very gated either, which is probably the most famous clone of the Super Fuzz. I'm actually not sure which one came first, this or the Hyper Fuzz. I would imagine they were made around the same time. So it's interesting that they both aren't gated. Maybe one copied the other. But yeah, sounds awesome. It doesn't have like a back plate with screws in it. Instead, it has like a rubber thing that's just holding I don't even know if it's aluminum in my a very thin back plate. The way you remove it is by removing this rubber band ring. So that's interesting. Might want to do something about that. Maybe rehouse it if you want it on your board. They don't make these anymore, but I think I got mine for around $160. All right, next up we have the Balls Supercharger. This is made by a dude in Brooklyn, New York. It's very large as well, not as big as the original. Instead of a tone switch It has a range knob, which kind of helps blend between those two tones, and I think that just adds to the versatility. It also has a clean blend, which makes it really good for playing bass. This is actually specifically made for bass. I've tried it on guitar as well. It never gets fully dirty. Like, there's always a bit of clean signal in there, so it sounds a little strange, but I guess that does give you some options to have like more of an attack through your clean tone. But on bass, it sounds fantastic. It is gated. It's not as aggressively gated as the original. I'm not sure if he still makes them. I think he does, but I got mine for around $232. This is the Fuzzlord FU2. This is a limited edition pink version. This is made in Eugene, Oregon, and it's kind of a mix between the Hyper Fuzz and the Super Fuzz. It doesn't have a tone switch or a tone knob or anything, but instead it has a bass and treble knob. So I suppose if you want the mid-present setting of the original, you turn the bass and treble down, and then you're just left with mids. And then if you want the mid-scooped version, you would just turn the treble and the bass up all the way, and then you're left with no mids. It's an interesting way of kind of getting around that switch, and I guess it keeps it really versatile as well. It also has an internal trim pot to change the amount of octave that you get. These go for about $205 new, I believe. And yeah, this one's great. Okay, next up we have Danelectro, the Eisenhower Fuzz. This is made in China. It is the exact same layout as the FU2. However, it has a tone switch. So not only can you adjust the treble and bass, but within that, you can still have a mid-present and mid-scooped. So you can like do the Univox thing and then also EQ the Univox thing. So it's really, really versatile. And it is pretty cheap. It's, around $150 new. And yeah, no complaints here. All right, next up we have the GUP Tech Fuzz. They're a French-Canadian company in Quebec, so I feel like it's pronounced like Fuzz. I don't know. But this is basically Boss Hyper Fuzz, also known as the FC2. It's very similar to the Eisenhower Fuzz I just showed you, but it has the added boost mode that is found in the Hyper Fuzz. Now, me personally, I think the boost setting on the Hyper Fuzz is completely unnecessary. I don't really care about it at all. I want the fuzz, not the overdrive. But it's cool that they have it. It just makes it that much more versatile. These go for around 160 new. Now we have the Behringer SF300. This is definitely the cheapest pedal on this list. You can get this for about $25. Designed in Germany, but made in China. Basically an exact copy of the Boss Hyper Fuzz. Main difference being it's made of plastic, whatever. So you might want to rehouse it if you're going to keep it on your board, but just for having around the house and recording, it is an exact copy. Josh Scott from JHS Pedals, he did a video on it, and it sold out super quick. So I had mine kind of on hold for a while, but eventually I got it and I tried it. It's really, really amazing. It's got treble and bass controls. It has a gain knob, and it has the Fuzz 1 and Fuzz 2 modes, just like the original. It also has the boost, which I've already explained I'm not a fan of, but hey. The other thing about this one specifically that the Hyper Fuzz doesn't have, there's like an accidental in-between mode that is sort of a mix of modes 1 and 2, much like this guy, which I feel like, I don't know, maybe there's some something going on here I don't know about. Here is the Pepers Pedals Humongous Fuzz. This is made in New Zealand. In my opinion, this is like the ultimate version of the Boss Hyper Fuzz because it does all the stuff that the original does, but it also has a clean blend. So it's like a Hyper Fuzz that you can use on bass or any other kind of thing. The other cool thing is it has the middle mode that the Behringer has as a default setting on here, because with the Behringer you have to kind of like play with the switch to get it into that middle mode. This is just, it's a third option, which is really cool. It has this extra knob as well, which just adds additional EQ bands. I usually just keep that stuff as open as possible. There's internal switches for it. I don't really fully know how to explain it, but I just keep this up all the way because I just think it sounds the biggest when I do that. And I guess, yeah, with the EQ bands, you can isolate them internally via internal trim pots. This is also what I assume all Hyper Fuzzes are. It's not nearly as gated as the original Super Fuzz. I got this for about $195. Next up we have the DeadFx I Can't Feel My Face Super Fuzz. This was the first Super Fuzz clone that I got, and if you, as you can see, huge difference in size. I was using this for, a couple of years, and then I suddenly get this thing, and it changes my life, because now I can feasibly use this with any setup I have, because this is actually the only mini pedal of the Super Fuzz. You have the Guyatone TZ2, which is small, but it's not really a mini pedal as far as like the mini standard enclosure that we get nowadays. It has a tone knob instead of the tone switch, and it has a clip knob, which is just diode biasing. It also has an internal trim pot to affect how gated it is. These are made in Austin, Texas, and I believe they go for around $140. Now we have the JPTR FX Add Violence. This is made in Germany. It has a tone knob and a diode switch, which by turning off makes the fuzz a lot bigger and more aggressive. It has 3 internal trim pots, which is a lot. One is for clean blend, one is for octave, and the other is for a boost. It's interesting because those knobs are all kind of interactive, so you might need to mess with it a little bit to get your ideal setting, but it is very versatile and it sounds great. I got this for $225. Now we have the Wilson Effects Knuckle Dragger. This is made in Indiana. It has an evolve knob, which goes from really tight and compressed to open and expanded. It has a mid-range knob and also a tone knob. There's also a texture knob, which switches between different characters that can make the fuzz sound more Velcro-y. And it also has an internal bias knob. It's really versatile, and this is a limited edition finish. It's like some anniversary finish. Usually there's a big, like, muscular gorilla man here, and this is a more sleek version. Okay, now we have the Abominable Electronics Demon Lung. This is the most recent Super Fuzz clone that I've purchased. They're made in Seattle. It's essentially an FC2 with an added clean blend and a mids knob, which a lot of these don't have. Actually, yeah, the only other pedal is the Knuckle Dragger that has a mids knob. So that's interesting, and that adds some new texture to it. They're pretty hard to get. They sell out pretty quickly. This is actually technically a new circuit version, an old enclosure, because he had some left over lying around and he decided to sell them. So I guess pretty soon he's going to come out with a new version with a new design. I don't fully know what that's going to look like, but yeah, awesome pedal. So that's all of my Super Fuzzes. As you can tell, I'm super into these pedals, hence why I have 12 of them. I think they sound equally good on guitar and bass. They're perfect for power chords, and they do the single note lead thing very well too. I don't use it as much for that, but it does do it. The gated versions, like the original and others that are close to the original, that can maybe make it not sustain as much, but if you put enough input into it, it will. The cool thing about collecting Super Fuzz pedals is there is like a feasible amount of them. I would guess 60 to 70, and that is a lot, but could you possibly name how many Fuzz Face clones there are, how many Tone Bender clones there are, how many Big Muff clones there are? No. And I think the reason why there aren't as many Super Fuzz clones is because they don't really have like that one guy that used it that made it really famous. Pete Townsend used one live at like Leeds and a couple other places, but wasn't really like showcased a whole lot. And you have like Electric Wizard making the Hyper Fuzz famous, and then you have Fu Manchu making this one famous, but it's none of it's to the level of like Jeff Beck and the Tone Bender or Hendrix and the Fuzz Face. So yeah, it's not as known as the others, but it is still a very loved pedal, and I feel very lucky that I have always had one. But yeah, thank you so much for tuning in. If you liked this, or if you have any questions about any of the Super Fuzzes, if you want me to do a longer video on any of them specifically, or just another Super Fuzz video in general, I'm sure I can think of more to talk about. Yeah, let me know in the comments. Like and subscribe. Thank you so much. I will see you next time.